You lied to this entire room, Lee, and you did it with a straight face. The words dropped like a bombshell inside the packed hearing chamber at the New York County Courthouse. Zohran Mamdani was standing, fists clenched, his voice unwavering, while cameras zoomed in, capturing the moment that would replay on every news channel across the country. Lee Zeldin, visibly shaken, tried to respond. But the room wasn't his anymore. It belonged to Zohran now. How did it come to this? What secret had just been revealed? And why did the audience, made up of journalists, students, and elected officials, suddenly fall dead silent, as if watching history unfold? Let's go back to where it all began. 2 days earlier, in the very same courtroom. The setting was a public oversight inquiry, called by the State Ethics Committee. The issue at hand: misuse of public funds, potential collusion with private defense contractors, and evidence that pointed to Lee Zeldin's office. What was supposed to be a routine hearing had already become something else by the time Zohran Mamdani walked into the marble-floored chamber at 9:00 a.m. sharp. The air was tense. The murmurs were constant. Zohran, always calm, had a brown folder in his hand. Not a laptop, not a team of lawyers, just a single folder. And inside it, a document that no one, no journalist, no committee member, not even Lee himself, knew was about to change everything. He sat silently for the first 20 minutes, letting others ask their rehearsed questions. Lee Zeldin, in a gray suit and rehearsed smile, deflected each one with ease. He quoted budget reports, invoked national security, smiled for the cameras. Then came Zohran's turn. He stood up slowly. No theatrics, no raised voice. Mr. Zeldin, on April 12, 2024, did your office authorize a $2.4 million transfer to a company called Brexton Dynamics? Lee raised an eyebrow. Brexton Dynamics provides strategic defense consulting. That transaction was fully authorized by whom? Zohran interrupted. A pause. I did. The room grew still. That was the first crack. Zohran opened his folder. I'm holding a statement from Brexton Dynamics' CEO, time-stamped and notarized, stating that no services were ever rendered, and the payment was labeled internally as a political favor. Would you care to explain that? Silence. Even the committee chair leaned forward now. Lee blinked. His mouth opened, then closed. His hands, once folded neatly, were now tapping nervously against the desk. What followed was 25 minutes of unraveling. Zohran didn't shout. He didn't gloat. He simply asked, revealed, and waited. The kind of waiting that feels like thunder before a storm. And that was just the beginning. This story is far from over. But if you're already gripped by the truth, take a second to subscribe. It helps us keep digging where others won't. And tell me in the comments, should elected officials who knowingly misallocate funds be immediately suspended, or should they be tried in public view? The folder hit the table with a quiet thud, but the ripple it created was deafening. Zohran Mamdani didn't raise his voice. He didn't have to. The truth was loud enough. Lee Zeldin shifted in his seat, his expression slowly collapsing into something between confusion and fear. Across the long wooden bench, 3 committee members exchanged glances. No one had expected this. Certainly not Lee. Would you like to read it out loud, or shall I? Zohran asked evenly, tapping the edge of the folder with his index finger. Lee hesitated. This is out of context. Then provide the context, Zohran shot back, eyes locked onto him. Because the statement from Brexton Dynamics includes names, dates, wire transfer logs, and one particular note that says, and I quote, Zeldin requested expedited payment before mayoral endorsement event. Want me to read that part again? Gasps erupted from the back rows. Phones were raised. The hearing wasn't just public, it was viral now. In that moment, something shifted. You could feel it, like a drop in barometric pressure before a storm. Zohran, until then seen by many as a principled but soft-spoken assemblyman, had just proven that he came prepared for war. Lee finally opened the folder. His hands trembled as he turned the pages. He scanned the letterhead. He saw the CEO's signature. And then, most damning of all, he saw the copy of his own internal email, one that had never been made public, authorizing the transaction for strategic public favor. "Where did you get this?" Lee asked, no longer confident, no longer smiling. Zohran didn't answer immediately. Instead, he looked around the chamber, making sure every eye was on him. Then he spoke slowly. "I got it from someone who believed in the idea that public service should serve the public, not a candidate's political ambitions. Someone who worked inside your office until they couldn't stomach what they were being asked to do." Lee clenched his jaw. "This is a leak, an illegal leak." "And yet," Zohran said, "you haven't denied it's real." That silence was the nail. The committee chair, a woman who had kept her composure all morning, finally leaned forward into her mic. "Mr. Zeldin, under the authority granted to this ethics committee, we are formally requesting a recess for internal legal review. You are not to leave this building until instructed otherwise." That was when Lee lost it. He stood up. "This is political theater. This man is not a prosecutor. He's a socialist grandstander with a grudge." But the crowd was no longer on his side. One voice from the back called out, "Then answer the damn question." Security stepped in, gently but firmly guiding Lee back to his chair. Cameras didn't stop rolling. And Zohran? He didn't flinch. He didn't smirk. He simply took his seat again, folded his hands, and waited. The room was chaos around him. Reporters were already leaving to file their breaking stories. Protesters outside had caught wind of the documents and started chanting. But Zohran stayed still. He knew that moments like this weren't about noise. They were about patience. Because he wasn't finished. Not even close. "If you're still watching, I want to hear from you. What do you think this document means for Lee Zeldin's political future? And more importantly, should internal whistleblowers be protected when exposing corruption, even if it means leaking classified documents? Drop your thoughts below. And if you believe in public accountability, consider subscribing. There's more coming." The hearing room was emptied within 10 minutes of the committee's announcement. Spectators were ushered out. Journalists paced the hallway, phones glued to their ears, broadcasting fragments of what they'd just witnessed. Inside the private antechamber of the courthouse, room 4B, accessible only through a side door guarded by security, Zohran Mamdani sat alone at a long conference table. No aides, no press, just him and a half-finished glass of water. Across from him, Lee Zeldin was pacing. Two of his attorneys whispered to him urgently. One of them looked pale. The other looked furious. "You're finished," one of them said under their breath. "This isn't just political anymore. This is federal." Zohran leaned forward, not speaking, just watching. Then finally, "You had every chance to tell the truth, but you used public money like a private bank account." Lee turned to face him. "Don't act righteous. You think you're clean? You think you haven't cut deals to stay afloat in this pit?" Zohran's response was quiet. "If I had, you'd already be waving the proof." Lee's jaw clenched. His foot tapped erratically on the floor. For the first time, it was clear. He wasn't afraid of losing a seat. He was afraid of losing control. One of the committee aides entered, holding a sealed envelope. She handed it to Zohran. "The chair asked you to review this privately before we reconvene," she said, then left. Zohran broke the seal and unfolded the 2 pages inside. As his eyes scanned the text, the room seemed to narrow. It wasn't just the Brexton payment anymore. This document detailed a second transaction, $750,000 funneled through a shell corporation based in Delaware, approved by Lee's office 2 months earlier. The recipient? A tech company specializing in voter data analytics, owned by Zeldin's brother-in-law. Zohran didn't speak for a full minute. He folded the document and placed it in his folder beside the first set. Then, without raising his voice, "You used public money to buy private power. You didn't just lie to the chamber. You lied to voters, to families." Lee didn't deny it. Instead, he said something that chilled the room. "You think they'll care, Mamdani? You think anyone out there cares who moves what money where? They want someone who wins. I win." Zohran stared at him for a long moment, then stood up. "You've built your career on people believing nothing matters. But it does. You just forgot that." Lee's attorney stepped between them. "If you try to make this about more than policy—" "It is more than policy," Zohran snapped. "This is about who gets to run this country. People who steal behind closed doors, or people who still believe in accountability." The door opened again. "The committee is ready to resume," the aide announced. And as they both walked toward the hearing room, the contrast couldn't have been more stark. Zohran walked calmly, hands at his side, documents in place. Lee walked fast, jacket disheveled, lips tight, eyes darting like someone already trying to rewrite the next chapter. Back in the courtroom, the energy was different. Cameras returned. Committee members were tense. Protesters outside had doubled in size. And before anyone could speak, the chairwoman leaned into her mic. "We have received additional documentation, and at the request of Assemblyman Mamdani, we are reopening the floor for direct questioning." Lee's face dropped. Zohran stood. No dramatics, no script, just truth. "This morning, you all saw the first document. What I'm about to show you is worse." He raised a second sheet of paper, and the chamber held its breath. If you're watching this and wondering, how deep does this go? How much can a single person expose when they refuse to look the other way? Then stay with us. Comment below. What would you do if you held the document that could bring down a powerful man? And if you're tired of watching corruption win, you know what to do. Subscribe. You're not alone. Zohran Mamdani held the document between his fingers like a loaded weapon. He didn't slam it down. He didn't raise his voice. He just held it up, level with his chest, as the camera lenses zoomed in and the room grew so quiet you could hear the shuffling of a notepad in the third row. "This is a signed agreement between Zeldin's office and a Delaware-based company called Sync," Zohran began calmly. "On the surface, it looks like a tech contract. But look closer." He placed the document gently on the committee's desk. A staffer picked it up and handed out copies. "In this document," Zohran continued, "public funds, taxpayer funds, were used to commission a voter profiling system, one designed to filter, sort, and rank New Yorkers by race, income level, and voting history." Murmurs. Loud ones. "And what's more," Zohran added, "the CEO of Sync is Jason Blake, Zeldin's brother-in-law." Lee Zeldin gripped the edges of the table. His knuckles were white. "That's a lie," he hissed. Zohran turned to him, steady. "Then you won't mind us subpoenaing your communications with Mr. Blake from March 3rd, in which you personally wrote, 'Use this data to find out which districts can be manipulated.' Quietly." The room exploded. This wasn't just fraud. This was a scheme to manipulate democracy itself. The chairwoman banged the gavel repeatedly. "Order! Order in the chamber!" Zeldin stood up again, visibly sweating now. "This is a setup. A hit job. This man, this so-called assemblyman, he's hijacking due process." Zohran stayed silent. He didn't need to argue anymore. The document spoke louder than any speech ever could. The chairwoman looked directly at Zeldin. "We are moving to suspend Mr. Zeldin's committee access pending full investigation, effective immediately." Security stepped forward. For the first time in his career, Lee Zeldin was no longer in control of the room, or the narrative. He was escorted out through the side door he'd once walked through like a king, and in that moment, all eyes turned to Zohran Mamdani. He didn't smile. He didn't gloat. He simply gathered his folder, walked to the mic one last time, and said, "Today wasn't about revenge. It wasn't about party. It was about principle. Every dollar misused, every voice manipulated. It chips away at the democracy we pretend to protect. No more pretending." He stepped away, and the chamber erupted in applause. Not the performative kind, the real kind. The kind that makes you believe the system can still hold, that integrity can still rise, that one voice, calm and prepared, can still shake the powerful from their pedestals. Outside the courthouse, the chants weren't about Lee Zeldin anymore. They were about Zohran. "We see you. We hear you. We back you." That night, cable news ran the footage on loop. Hashtags trended. Think pieces filled the headlines. But none of it mattered more than what Zohran did quietly, hours later, walking alone down a Brooklyn street, finally letting out the breath he'd been holding for weeks. He didn't want fame. He wanted accountability. And that's exactly what he got. If you've followed this far, thank you. Now tell me honestly, do we need more representatives who speak softly but carry the truth? Would you vote for someone who chooses courage over comfort? Drop your thoughts in the comments. And if you believe what Zohran stood for matters, not just today but tomorrow, subscribe. This is the kind of story they hope you'll forget. Let's make sure that never happens.